Good afternoon. We're back with another episode of the Lord of the Rings LCG Progression Series, and today we're talking about the lore and quest guide of the Watcher in the Water. Elrond has asked you to scout the mines of Moria on your return to Lorien, hoping to discover if it is the source of increased orc activity along the Misty Mountains. So, if you recall, in the previous two quests, we went from Lorien. This is located to the northwest of Minas Tirith and Mordor, and to the southeast of the Shire. Escorted Arwen from Lorien through the mountains and then up to Rivendell. Now, Elrond is asked if on the return trip to Lorien, if we'd go through or check out Moria to see if it's the source of increased activity. So Moria, the west gate, is located here. The Watcher in the Water guarded the west gate as of the time of the Fellowship of the Ring and the time of Balin's colony as well, as they wrote about the Watcher guarding the west gate so that they could not get out of Moria. So that is the location of the quest, south of Rivendell along the mountains and outside the west gate of Moria. The Moria would lead through the mountains and then out the east gate and down to Lorien again. Moria, also called Khazad-dûm. The lore of this quest is a little odd to me because this quest comes after Khazad-dûm, in which the party goes in through the east gate and does indeed discover orc activity in there. So, could we not report this to Elrond? In any case, Elrond has asked the party to investigate Moria again. Perhaps he feels that the orcs are only active in the east part of Moria and is unsure about the west part. So we journey down, and the quest takes place outside of the west gate of Moria. Your approach is blocked by a dark lake that slumbers beneath the face of the cliffs. You must search for a way around the water. There's a quote from the Fellowship of the Ring. The others swung round and saw the waters of the lake seething as if a host of snakes were swimming up from the southern end. The doors of Durin are blocked by an ancient spell. You must figure out a way into the mines before the seething bog and its watcher consumes you all. So in the books, the doors were blocked by a spell, and the spell was simple. The words on the door were "Say friend" and "Enter." And the answer to this riddle was to say the Elvish word for friend, as the runes on the door were in Elvish and were from a time when there was a lot of friendship between elves and dwarves. And so dwarves wanted anyone who knew the Elvish word for friend to be able to enter Moria. And so elves made runes on the door, which would cause the door to open if you said the Elvish word for friend. However, the party we're in does not seem to know this, as we have to figure out a way through the doors of Durin, essentially as part of the quest. And there are only two phases to the quest. So, for phase 1, the setup, remove the Watcher and Doors of Durin from the encounter deck and set them aside out of play. 13, progress. When revealed, reveal cards from the encounter deck and add them to the staging area until there's at least X threat in the staging area. X is twice the number of players in the game, so you're revealing cards until you find 2 threat in a solo game. That card would do it if we were playing solo. In phase 2, when revealed, add the Watcher to the staging area, and Doors of Durin becomes the active location. Shuffle all tentacle cards in the discard pile back into the encounter deck. If the players have at least 3 victory points and defeat this stage, they have won the game. You acquire 3 victory points either by clearing the Doors of Durin or by destroying the Watcher. This is a fun quest. It's not an easy quest, but it's not a super hard one either. It's well balanced, I would say. It's more on the difficult side than not difficult, but it's well balanced. A lot of the challenge from this quest comes from the text on the Watcher. While there is another tentacle enemy in play, the Watcher cannot be optionally engaged. And there are a lot of tentacle enemies, and they can be very difficult to deal with. So the different types of tentacles are Grasping Tentacle, Striking Tentacle, Thrashing Tentacle. There are 2 paths to beating this quest, as I mentioned. Either combat against the Watcher, that one's fairly straightforward, or the Doors of Durin. Progress tokens that would be placed on Doors of Durin are instead placed on the current quest card. Each player may discard any number of cards from his hand, then discard the top card of the encounter deck. If the first letter of the encounter card's title matches that of one of the discarded player cards, add Doors of Durin to your victory display. So basically what you do is you discard cards in your hand. Let's say I had a card in my hand that began with B. I discard the card that begins with B, and let's say I had 3 B cards in my hand. I don't know why I would discard all 3 of them, but I've discarded a B card on 3 consecutive turns. Now each of those turns I'm revealing the top card of the encounter deck, and let's say I discarded a B card from my hand. Now I reveal Black Uruks. Black Uruks begins with a B, and therefore it would match one of my discarded cards, and Doors of Durin would immediately move to the victory display. Let's say I had instead discarded a card that began with T, and I revealed a Thrashing Tentacle from the top of the encounter deck. Same result. You're trying to match the first letter of a card from your hand with the first letter of a card from the encounter deck, and you may do this once per round, and you may do as many cards as you like. You could discard a B, a T, and an S. So I actually did take the time to look through the encounter deck, and I know that the most common cards in the encounter deck begin with either B, S, or T. And in fact, I would not consider it really worth trying any other letter unless I was in desperation. But a B, S, or a T I will try if I have a card in hand with a B, S, or T, and I want to complete the Doors of Durin path. It is the easiest path if you get it, but it's also the most random if you're not playing some kind of effect that looks at the top card of the encounter deck. If you are, then this becomes quite easy. It's kind of similar, it reminds me a little of Flight from Moria, where if you're playing a card that helps you look at the top of the encounter deck, and can be very helpful because it can guarantee you an easier path to victory, as the Doors of Durin is the easier path to victory if you have a way of looking at the top of the encounter deck. If you don't, I'd say it's still worth trying if all you're trying to do is get through the quest. Obviously, if you want to play a thematic, well, if you're trying to play I want to beat the Watcher type of thing, which is fun to do, then you're not going to bother with the Doors of Durin at all. But if you don't care how you win and just want to win, then I would attempt. You can do it once per round. Once per round, I would discard whatever B, S, or T cards I have in my hand and see if I can get a victory that way. Because if you do successfully clear Doors of Durin, all you need is 5 progress to win. So that's how you win the Doors of Durin path. Each round, discard whatever B, S, or T cards you have in your hand. Reveal the top card of the encounter deck. Look at it first if you can, but if you can't, give it a shot anyway with a B, S, or T card and see if you get it. And if you don't, then you move on to dealing with the Watcher and try again the next round. And if you do, then great. You can just gain your 5 progress and win. Let's talk about the Watcher path. The Watcher has 4 threat, 5 attack, 7 health, 7 defense, and 9 health. He has Regenerate 2, so this heavily favors beating him in 1 turn, and it gives you disincentive to use direct damage method, like for example Sneak Attack Gandalf, Sneak Attack Gandalf, Gandalf, or something like that, over multiple turns because you'll lose 2 of the damage. Each round. Regenerate means he gains back 2 health in the refresh phase, at the end of the refresh phase. And this is the first time we've seen the regenerate trait, so it is worth mentioning what it does. Heals 2 health every round, refresh phase. While there's another tentacle enemy in play, the Watcher cannot be optionally engaged, which means you have to defeat the tentacles in order to optionally engage him. And he's not easy to engage through a normal engagement check because he's 48 threat. So from a practical point of view, you really have to be able to optionally engage him to defeat him. And before you can do that, you have to defeat the tentacles. So let's go over what each of these does. They all have low threat, which means they're generally going to engage you the turn they get in. It's possible you have lower than 18 threat, but it's really unlikely. So they're going to engage you the turn that they come into play. They attack for 3, for 4, or for 3. When Grasping Tentacle is attacked, discard the top card of the encounter deck. Their difficulties typically come when they are attacked or you try to clear them. But one of them has an effect when it attacks. 2 of them have an effect when they are attacked, and that's one of them is Grasping Tentacle. If discard the top card of the encounter deck when it's attacked. If that card has a shadow effect or is a tentacle enemy, attach this card to an attacking character as a tentacle attachment with the text, attached characters attack and shields are reduced to 0. So you try to clear a tentacle by attacking it, and you reveal a card, and if it's a tentacle or a shadow effect, or has a shadow effect, or is a tentacle enemy, not a tentacle treachery, you then gain a tentacle attachment on that character that reduces your attack and shield to 0. That is a problem. Just taking a look at the encounter deck, shadow card, tentacle enemy, shadow card, blank, blank, shadow card, shadow card, shadow card, blank, 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 tentacle enemy, blank. It seems to me like the odds of getting a shadow card or a tentacle enemy are probably like 60-40-ish. So you only have a 40% chance or so, give or take, of the attack going through and clearing the enemy. Otherwise, you've just reduced your own ability to do combat in the future. And it becomes a tentacle attachment. Now the thing is, Watcher in the Water can only not be optionally engaged while there's a tentacle enemy in play, so tentacle attachments don't count against your ability to engage the Watcher. So you can at least deal with the Grasping Tentacle that way, even if you suffer the negative effect. Striking Tentacle. When Striking Tentacle attacks, discard the top card of the encounter deck. If the card is a shadow effect or a tentacle enemy, this attack is considered undefended. This is the least difficult of the tentacles to deal with, because you can attack back freely, and attacking undefended actually can be a big deal though because of the 4 attack on a hero. It's the least difficult of the tentacles to kill once you get a chance to kill it, but it may kill one of your heroes. If you're playing low health heroes, if you were playing like all 3 or 4 health heroes and this card got a shadow effect or a tentacle enemy, which is like 60-40, you just lose because it just killed one of your heroes. So that's rough. And you do have to, well, as you can tell, this deck is strongly implying that you ought to play some kind of ability to look at the top of the encounter deck so that you know what's coming, possibly even play Denethor so that you can change what's coming if you need to. The deck is strongly discouraging the player from playing blindly, not knowing what's in the encounter deck, due to cards like this, which can simply kill you if the wrong card comes off the encounter deck, and also Doors of Durin, which adds a path to victory, or makes a path to victory much easier if you know what's on top of the encounter deck. So take that into consideration when you're deck building, that this deck is strongly encouraging the player to play cards that help you to know what's coming off of the encounter deck. strongly encouraging it. And if you don't, well, if you're playing a hero that has all heroes that have 4 attack or less, if you get the wrong card when Striking Tentacle attacks, you will just lose because you'll lose a hero. Now, my strategy when I played the quest was not to look at the top card of the encounter deck at all and just hope for the best. If you do that, you'll take some losses, as I probably did. I can't remember now. But this is the challenge that the encounter deck is presenting, and you can choose how you want to tackle it as you like according to your style. Thrashing Tentacle. When Thrashing Tentacle is attacked, discard the top card of the encounter deck. If the card has a shadow effect or is a tentacle enemy, deal the damage from the attack to one character an attacking player controls, ignoring defense. So, that's all 3 of these effects are pretty nasty if you get a shadow card or a tentacle enemy. And therefore, if you're not going to play any effects that look at the top of the encounter deck, then one of the best strategies for dealing with these dudes is go quickly. Try to beat it as quickly as you can and get as few tentacle enemies from you as you can, because the more turns you spend on this, the better the chance that you're going to have tentacles stack up. And if you can't look at the top of the encounter deck, then you're going to struggle to deal with them without their horrifying effects getting you, unless you get lucky. Once you've got these tentacles dealt with because you knew what was coming and you could mitigate their effects, or because you got lucky, or because you just didn't get any tentacles out, or because you used Gandalf's direct damage to deal with them, then if you're going the route of defeating the Watcher, you can attack him, or you can optionally engage him. Once he's been optionally engaged, you don't have to worry if you get additional tentacles. You can just tank their attacks and not worry about them too much, because the Watcher doesn't unengage if a tentacle comes afterwards. It's a one-time effect. If the Watcher's in the staging area at the end of the combat phase, each player must deal 3 damage to one character he controls. So you really don't want to move into phase 2 without a plan for defeating Doors of Durin quickly, or without any tentacle enemies in play, because if you enter into phase 2 and then you're trying to deal with the tentacles while the Watcher is dealing 3 damage to a character every round, you're going to have trouble. It's much easier to deal with the tentacles in phase 1 if your victory over the quest requires you to deal with them. And sometimes it doesn't, but that doesn't mean you want to let them stack up either. That can get tough to deal with. So my advice in phase 1 is clear the staging area before moving on to phase 2. Unless you're trying to just blitz through the quest, ignore the tentacles as best you can, clear the Doors of Durin, and then coast to victory. That's a perfectly viable strategy for this quest. But if you're not doing that, then stick around in phase 1 until you get rid of the tentacles, because they get harder to deal with in phase 2 once the Watcher's in the staging area dealing 3 damage to a character every round, and adding his 4 threat against you. So, the encounter deck is heavily incentivizing what's called scrying, or looking at the top card of the encounter deck. Take that and do with it whatever you will, according to the way that you like to play. Perhaps the Doors of Durin strategy appeals to you, perhaps the Watcher strategy. Perhaps you will use scrying, and perhaps not. You can beat the quest any of those ways, though not all of them will have the same odds to win, let's say. Some of those ways are less efficient than others in terms of the number of times that you'll win, the percentage of the time that you'll win. It's a fun quest though, good quest, and the cards in the adventure pack are good. If you're only browsing through the adventure packs, these expansions, and picking and choosing which ones you'll play, I would recommend this one, this adventure pack, for sure. I'd recommend it pretty highly. It'll rank up there in my tier list of individual adventure packs to buy based on their replayability, enjoyability, and based on the cards that come with them. So thanks for watching.